Hello, good morning. So, next speaker up is David Kim. He's the co-founder and CEO of Animoca. He described it as the world's biggest small game developer, with more than 300 games in release so far. Prior to this, he was the CEO of Lycos and the CEO of Mail.com. He'll be taking you through the navigating mobile ecosystem throughout Asia, where he'll take a good look at some of the quirks and special aspects of mobile gaming across Asia. Thank you, David. Big hand for him.
Thanks very much. Good morning. I think the last guy was a little bit taller than me. I can't see over the computer. My name is David. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Animoca. And I'm going to be talking about actually mobile marketing and distribution throughout Asia, which of course, for anybody who knows Asia or just international business overall, there is no such thing as Asia or international. Each market is very unique, and we have to approach it as such. But given that I had only 20 minutes, I think I've got now 15 minutes. So we'll try to go through as fast as we can. Just really briefly about Animoca, 65 million uniques, 160 million downloads, so pretty hefty numbers. Probably our most impressive number is that we've got 300 games developed over the last 2 years. And that's largely because our strategy isn't that of trying to do one big hit and creating a hub and spokes model. We're actually trying to do a more of a supermarket model where you have a category leader in each aisle of the supermarket. And so that's why we actually are focused on crunching out so many games. To mention just a few, we've got our first breakout hit was Pretty Pet Salon in 2011. Our later hits include Stargirl, Robo 5, and Thor, Lord of Storms. I actually have a voice track on that if you're interested. You're probably familiar with seeing numbers like this, and some of the numbers are obvious enough. You've actually seen it in the earlier presentation as well. North America, Western Europe is about 50% smartphone penetration. But what's probably not as well known is the fact that actually most urban areas in China are also getting close to and will soon hit 50%. That's urban China, of course. Now, rest of China, we're still talking about single digit as far as smartphone penetration. But I threw out a couple of other countries such as Japan because they're very interesting, and this kind of points out why each country is very unique. You would think that the third largest economy in the world, Japan, and as sophisticated as Japan is technologically, you would think that it's a much higher number, but as some of you may know, Docomo has dominated the last decade, and Docomo is one of those super smart feature phones, or a dumber version of a smartphone. So either way you look at it, they didn't really need the smartphone that the rest of the world needed at the time. And another number that actually underlying this that you might want to pay attention to is the pink area, which is the iOS numbers. If you're from the Valley, you would think that the world revolves around Cupertino. And if you go to any of these conferences in Hamburg or Barcelona, Singapore, you'd realize that this is becoming more and more an Android world. For better or for worse. Some people think it's a little bit chaotic, but still, there's no denying the fact that Android is right now kind of the big tidal wave coming. And the only exception to where Apple has still the dominant market share is actually the US and Japan, largely because it was SoftBank who launched the smartphone revolution, as it were, in Japan with iPhones. And nod out to the platinum sponsors. BlackBerry is still killing it in Mexico. Keep the faith. Going through it step by step, the first thing that you have to look for is actually you have to be in the right marketplace. And I've highlighted some of the market. Unfortunately, we're in a geography where there is a lot of room for growth. And some of the biggest numbers in Vietnam, China, Thailand, Philippines, these are the emerging markets, and this is where, if you're forward-looking, this is where the opportunity lies. But of course, this is where also there's just a lot of room for error, and there's a lot of uphill to climb. So after you pick the right market that you want to be in, then you have to consider the various platforms. And of course, there's iOS and Android. These are the two juggernauts. These are the 800-pound gorillas in town, but they are not the only ones in town. And Amazon just announced their launch of the their China store, and there are other markets that are coming down the pipeline. And the most interesting development, I think, in the last 6 months, which is a long time in our industry, in the last 6 to 9 months, there was the whole phenomena of Kakao and Line soon thereafter. And for those of you who are not as familiar, these are essentially messenger apps, but have enough of a local dominance that they are a de facto platform. They're a meta platform, if you will, and they provide a totally new way of discovery. And that is the biggest problem for any app developers and publishers, is discovery. I mean, there's getting close to be a million apps on Android, million apps on iPhones. There's just no way to get discovered intelligently with cost efficiency. So Kakao, Line, these are new ways in which you can actually not just get onto the iTunes store or Google Play and try to rank there or get featured there, which is the most effective way today. But there are other marketing opportunities, and there will certainly be more to come. Just going back on Kakao and Line, keep in mind though, as they make it easier in that there's a new way of discovery, but inversely, now you're paying 30% to the Cupertino gods and the Mountain View gods, and now you're also paying additional 30%. So in net effect, you're almost paying 50% of taxes to these platform players. But right now, these are the most effective ways of getting discovered. So you've done the market and you've decided on a platform, and then you have to find the right model that works. And as I keep talking about Japan, Korea, some China, but as it is in Asia, these are still 90% of the market. And while there is a lot of development happening down here in Southeast Asia in terms of raw revenue dollars, still those three markets dominate the Asian landscape. So free versus paid. Paid model is becoming a more and more difficult model to push, largely because freemium has really become the flavor of the day. And this may change. We're in an industry that's as old as a few years, so who knows exactly what's coming down the pipeline. But as it stands today, freemium is the model to follow. And especially in countries where payment systems are well done, it is actually, especially if you're a small developer, you can create a game with a few 100,000 players, and already you can have a model that works and supports your offices. One thing that I want to talk about, something that has passed everywhere else, and talking about China in particular. China is still very, very much the Wild West, as it were, in the American analogy, and it's because iTunes is not established there. Google Play is not there. So right now you've got your pirated iOS stores, and you've got 91.com, 360.com. These guys are the ones that are actually driving it rather than Google Play. And so this creates for a very chaotic environment. Opportunities are always present wherever there's chaos, but it is nobody knows exactly how to do it, except for the companies. There's about a dozen companies that bot, and these are the only guys that for sure make money, because that's the easiest way to get discovered in China still. Obviously frowned upon by everybody, and we've largely stayed out of China because it's difficult to actually do things in a clean way. Not to say that it's impossible. And if you do actually have a if you've got Angry Birds, you've got Temple Run, your Fruit Ninja, those games I think can happen without any silliness going on. But still, if you're an indie developer trying to do things in China, it becomes a very, very expensive or a messy proposition. And with each market, you have to know the payment mechanism of each market. Carrier billing, fortunately, is super fluid in both Korea and in Japan. It's largely, as a matter of fact, I believe Google Play is now bigger in Korea than the local T store and the KT store. But until very recently, it was the carrier, and I think in Japan still is the case, that the carrier stores are still the dominant forms of distribution. And so when you have it be that seamless, and of course the carriers make it super easy for you to buy. And actually in China, they just announced that they will try to do common carrier billing amongst the 3 big telcos there. We'll see how that works. But again, in China, the payment system has it almost incentivized so that you spend a lot of money, and for the first-time users, they don't know that they've just spent half their monthly salary on games. But knowing which carrier store to go into and knowing which players dominate the market, as is the case down here, obviously Singtel, your Gigi, and these are getting to know your local markets as you're entering. Each market is so different. You have to get to know it intimately before you actually dive right in. And if you have dived in, then unless you are everywhere, and I don't know any mobile players, including your Rovios and your bigger guys, nobody has presence everywhere. You can't possibly master of this entire universe because we actually haven't had that much time to really globalize. But as the previous speaker has spoken, there's no shortage of people who will assist you and who will also charge you for that assistance. The network guys, as I call them just generically, they are there, and they do know the market and there's local network guys that you should rely on. There's some folks who are actually claiming to be global. There really aren't that many who can really say that they've got all the major markets done, or even half a dozen done. It really, if you search, and actually if you just go online, you can find out who the number 1, number 2 guys typically are. And I don't think it's a bad idea, especially coming out of the gate, to rely on these guys in the beginning, get to know the lay of the land. But I would emphasize again and again to anybody, do your market first. And in Singapore, where the local market is relatively small, obviously Singapore itself as an economy has built around export. But just within Southeast Asia, there is enough to do, and this is where you would be most familiar. Trying to compete with the Japanese guys, the Korean guys, and certainly the Chinese folks, you're going to be, it's certainly not impossible, and I'm not necessarily discouraging anybody from doing it, but it will be a very, very difficult and an expensive proposition out of the gate. And there are other ways to skin the cat. I would encourage anybody that's doing this to actually look at a much broader, look at this as a longer term business, and look at all the different options. Because, again, as I've said many times, this is I've been now doing this in various form from Internet 1.0 for the last 15 years or so. This market is changing super fast, and this will continue to change very fast. The dominant players of today will not be the dominant, or may not necessarily be the dominant players two years from now. So keep yourself flexible. Keep your eyes open in the next monetization scheme. This is somewhat basic, but obviously you have to know the regulatory do's and don'ts. Make sure that you don't fall into any pitfalls of not knowing what you should obviously know. If you're doing anything children related in the US, get to know your COPA rules and regulations super well, because that'll get you shut down faster than anything else on both iTunes and on Play. So knowing things like that, especially if you're going outside your known field of expertise in terms of geography, is very, very important. This is kind of my catch-all slide, and the theme again and again that I want to repeat is that you have to approach each market and know each market. And again, with my 15 minutes, I can't possibly sit here and tell you exactly how to crack the nut in Japan or in China. But what I can tell you is that at least just stepping back for a second, at the company level, we at Animoca have the 300 apps, and we're fairly well distributed, about a third in the US, third in Asia, third in Europe. But we have actually, we have a history of doing this on PC games, and we have local expertise that have been developed for the last decade or so in other platforms. So we're actually a little bit better equipped to actually go into a new market. But if you're going into a new market, and ones as crowded as Japan and Korea especially, you have to know, I would suggest that you at least, if not partner with, at least get in close proximity with a local player who can tell you the lay of the land. The competitive landscape it's fierce up in North Asia, and we're focused in Asia right now. But if you're going into Europe, obviously your dominant players in Europe, and of course US is, again, not impossible, but a very, very crowded environment. And so I would encourage all of you to look at any internationalization carefully, and build up your war chest in your home ground first. This is a slide that shows you basically the different steps to take, and depending on the game, you might not want to take it to level 3, where you basically try to localize everything down to the detail. Sometimes language translation is enough. Sometimes, if in the case of the early games that found a success, sometimes the first level translation of just the icon, the App Store icon, is enough. But this is getting down to more of the specifics. But I would say that in terms of working through Asia, do it carefully. Find people that you know close who you can work with, and we're based out of Hong Kong. We have presence in almost every country now, certainly in Asia. So encourage you to call the folks at Animoca. We're very friendly people, and that's about it. It's kind of hard to talk about Asia internationalization to a bunch of Asians, but here I am. So I think that was my 15 minutes, so I got a couple of minutes for Q&A. Or not. Great. Thanks, everybody.